Welcome back to the Countdown. I'm a Countdown host, MJ Book, back for another journey into the world of the Countdown. Hope everybody's doing good. As you notice, I've got an AEW hat on. This weekend watched a AEW pay-per-view with the crew at Third Generation Wrestling, and we did a post-show review. Please listen to that show to hear what the Ambassador Rob and the Real Big E and I said about that pay-per-view. It was a long night. It was a long night, but fun was had again by all. But we're here to talk about the countdown. And here I have a countdown here for you. And of course, it's me continuing this journey back to the 80s, continuing to do this 80s countdown that was requested to me to go through the entire 80s, through each year, and pick 10 movies. We're halfway through this. Of course, we started in 1989, have been slowly moving up to the start of the 80s. And of course, now we're discussing 1985. Oh boy, getting younger and younger and younger in this countdown as far as what yours truly was during that time. Now, in 1985, I started that year. Again, my math is so atrocious. I started that year 6 years old by August. My birthday, I was 7. So you have to focus this on some of the movies that might be on here, and some of them might be a little shocking that somebody of that age might have been watching some of these movies. Maybe shocking. I don't know. You'll have to be the judge of that. But instead of me talking about it, let's start the countdown. So this is a 10-spot countdown. Yes, 10, not 11. We've got 10. And we're going to start with a comedy, somewhat raunchy. Maybe there's a little bit of nudity. Maybe. I don't know. Actually, I do know, obviously, because I watched the movie. But, of course, this movie was directed by Amy Heckerling, written by John Hughes, stars Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, Dana Hill. It is National Lampoon's European Vacation. We're back with the Griswolds. The Griswolds are back. And for those who watched National Lampoon's Vacation, we all remember them trying to go to Wally World. This starts off with them on a game show, and they win this trip to go through Europe. The Griswolds going to Europe. Yeah, I think we all know that is just a train wreck, with Clark W. Griswold, played by, of course, Chevy Chase. And of course, you got the beautiful Beverly D'Angelo, trying to point right to her. There she is. And again, this movie is just hysterical. It's one of those rare moments, because I actually think European Vacation is better than just Vacation. I really do. I think it is better. A lot of people think Christmas Vacation, of those first 3 Griswold movies, a lot of people do think that Christmas Vacation is the best. I think it's European Vacation. European Vacation, to me, is far superior to Christmas and just Vacation. And let's not talk about Vegas and the remake they made a few years ago. But we should all be lucky that there's not real, at least I hope there's not real human beings like the Griswolds, because I don't think society would survive having somebody like Clark around. He's just stupid. In the nicest way, he's stupid, but he's just stupid. I don't mind being some Beverly D'Angelos. I don't mind that one at all. I mean, let's just face it. Back then, she was just gorgeous, just absolutely stunning. And you would look at her and you'd look at Clark and you'd be like, how on earth did you, what? Okay, I don't know what you did, but I guess you're doing it right. But this is just a classic. It's Chevy Chase at his best. During his this reign of movies that Chevy had before he absolutely lost it, and just Chevy just wasn't Chevy anymore. And if you want to know what I mean, watch his late night show, The Chevy Chase Show. Holy shit, it was just bad. But number 10, National Lampoon's European Vacation. Number 9, we are doing another comedy. This one directed by Jonathan Lynn, written by John Landis, Stellan Ellen Burren, Tim Curry, Christopher Lloyd, Madeline Kahn. I mean, this just had an all-star cast in this movie. Michael McKean, Martin Mull, Colleen Camp, Leslie Ann Warren, Bill Henderson, just an all-star cast with this movie. I'm pretty sure you already know what it is, but just in case you haven't figured out, Clue, of course, is based off of a board game that I'm pretty sure we all have played this board game. I remember playing this board game a lot with my dad. It's just a fun little board game where you're just trying to find out who did it and with what item and where. And they took that and made a movie out of it, and a surprisingly good movie. If only the video games, franchise, video game to movie could be so successful. Now, truth, there hasn't been a lot of board games to movies. There's Battleship. I think we all know that was a piece of shit. But this is just an absolute classic, and they added to it. Tim Curry's character, of course, no shock to anybody who watches Tim Curry movies. Tim stole the movie. He always steals movies. He steals wherever he's performing. If he's on just TV, animated shows, he just steals it. Such a brilliant actor. And of course, he's an integral part of my life just because I used to go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show here in Iowa at a theater, and I would go every midnight. I would be at that theater. I went for over 10 years, and I still go now when they do reunions, but it's not an every Friday thing anymore like it used to be so long ago. But Tim Curry, again, he's just a genius. He's just a genius. And I love the multiple endings they do in this movie. It's just so clever. This movie it's one of those movies that's funny and does it without trying to be funny. There's jokes just all over the place. And this movie does it so subtly that it's perfect. And the cast, they found the right people to play each role. Martin Mull is hysterical as Colonel Mustard. Madeline Kahn, who's up here, is Mrs. White. They just found the right people. Christopher Lloyd over here. I mean, just Leslie Ann Warren over here. I mean, just unbelievable. Just an unbelievable cast that they put together. They found the right people to do this. I've heard they've wanted to do a remake of Clue. Good fucking luck trying to find people who would play these roles, and especially with Tim Curry. Good luck. You're not going to find somebody who's going to be better than Tim Curry. He was perfect for this role. He did it so damn good. And this movie, I'm proud I own this one on Blu-ray. That should if I own it on Blu-ray, it does mean something that I love that movie specifically, because I did have it on VHS and I did have it on DVD, and I upgraded it to Blu-ray. So I have this thing 3 times and I don't care because the movie's just that damn good. So that is number 9, Clue. Number 8. All right. There's some comedy elements to this, but it's fighting, action, martial arts, music. Now, if you know the 80s, you probably already have a pretty good idea what this movie is, just from the description that I just gave it. But in case you don't, it is directed by Michael Schultz, stars Vanity, Christopher Murray. Tamak probably said his name wrong. Does that tell you what it is? In case it doesn't, who's the master? Still don't know? Last Dragon. Now, I recently bought the anniversary edition of this movie. It's somewhat shocking, when you really think how old this movie is. It's so goofy. Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon. It's a goofy black exploitation type of movie, martial arts involving music. But they found the right people to play, again, each role. Tema, again, I'm probably saying his name wrong. He played Leroy. He played Leroy very well. He was perfect for that role. Vanity. Okay. Vanity back then. Now, before I believe she did pass away. I really hope I'm not wrong on that. I do actually, in a way, I hope I am wrong. But as far as disseminating wrong information, I hope I'm not. But I think I heard that she'd passed away. If she did, rest in peace. Back then, she was this musical artist, and holy, just gorgeous. Truly one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen on the screen. Flat out. She's just gorgeous. And it takes place in New York, and you have this young martial artist who's trying to find the master. That's what he's trying to find. And along the way, he meets Vanity's character. And then you get the character who stole the whole damn movie, played by Julius Carry. Show enough. Shonuff stole the damn movie. He is the bad guy in this movie. He's not the only bad guy. There's Eddie Arcadian, who plays this evil music producer who wants Laura Charles Vanity's character to sign with him, and of course she doesn't really want anything to do with him. She thinks he's a scumbag. Shonuff is this martial artist who has this martial artist gang, and he thinks he's the baddest martial artist in the neighborhood, and everybody keeps talking about Leroy Green, and so he keeps taunting Leroy to fight him, and Leroy is very peaceful. He's peaceful, so he doesn't want to do it, and that's the whole plot of the movie. It's great considering what it is. It's surprisingly very good martial arts. The fight scenes are actually believable. At times they're laughable. You can laugh at them, but it's not so bad that you look at it and go, ooh, please don't play that. Please stop playing in front of my eyes right now. It's very entertaining. I would definitely recommend it. It is definitely very period piece, especially because it's music. It's a musical type of a movie as well. So there's a heavy music element. So when you hear that music, good God, does it reek of the 80s. So in some ways, it hasn't aged well just because of the music. But if you're one of the people that doesn't bother you, then I really think you would enjoy this movie. There was supposed to be a sequel to this movie, but they just couldn't get agreements on doing it, and so it just never happened. They did make an animated show, so there is an animated show of this that the events take place, I believe it's, if I remember right, after the events of this movie. So that's something I would definitely recommend if you want to see the continued adventures of Leroy Green and Shona. Anyway, that is my number 8, The Last Dragon. Oh boy, number 7. We stay, oddly enough, in the world of martial arts. Now, this one, there's not really the comedy element. We don't have, maybe there is unintentional comedy. Musical element, it's not really in the musical. This is just action. It's just an action adventure martial arts movie. And when you look at it, it's so corny. It's so corny, but I love this movie. I watched this movie literally about a month ago. I just love this damn movie. I can't get enough of watching this movie. It's corny as hell. I do not care. It's changed its name a couple of times. I hate when movies do that. But this is directed by Sam Furstenberg, written by Paul Damachi. It stars Michael Dudikoff, Steve James, Judy Arson, Michael Dudikoff. That should already tell you right there. And if you remember who Steve James is, that should also tell you. But just in case you haven't figured it out, let me help you. American Ninja, which has been changed a couple of times. Some places it's been changed American Warrior, not the TV show, please. It's also been changed to American Fighter. I really don't like it when it gets changed. To me, I grew up with it being American Ninja. So for anybody that has a problem with me referring it to American Ninja, look, I'm not meaning anything by it. It's just I grew up for decades calling it American Ninja. So to me, it's American Ninja. All right. Okay. But this stars Michael Dudikoff, who's playing an American soldier who's kind of the oddball on this military base. And he's kind of got a amnesic type thing going on. Again, it's the 80s. Let it go. But he slowly starts to remember about his past, and he's not the most popular person on this army base. And during very early in the movie, you see these ninjas. It's so comedic when you watch it, but I don't care. I love this movie. They're attacking these military bases and stealing supplies and materials that these bases have. And on one of these, Michael Dudikoff's character stops them. And with them on this raid or this attack was an innocent who was the daughter of the general of the military base. So they run off. He saves her life. You would think he becomes a hero. No, he becomes even more vilified. And there's a lot that happens along the way. And that's eventually when we meet Jackson, played by Steve James, who back in the day was this big buff brother, this martial artist. He was in I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, is a Kung Fu Joe. But it's a goofy martial arts movie. It's so goofy, but it became a franchise. They made 5 or 6 of these movies, I believe. And Michael Dudikoff was in about half of them. He was the star of the first 2, and then another person came in and became the new American Ninja. If I remember his name, it was David Bradley. And then there was American Ninja 4, which both of them was in, which back then I thought, oh, this is epic. It's both of them. And then eventually that was just the end for Dudikoff, and it just became Bradley for another movie or 2. But as far as Bradley, American Ninja, and Dudikoff, I prefer Michael Dudikoff personally. James, he was in the first 3 Steve James was in the first 3 American Ninja movies. If I remember right, he passed away at an early age. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So rest in peace to Steve James as well. Like I said, this is just a goofy martial arts movie. It's pure 80s as far as martial arts, the over-the-top martial arts action that's in this. But this was a huge hit. It was a huge, huge hit. There's a documentary that I saw just about a month ago that I saw on YouTube. I would definitely give a search for that. It was a really good documentary talking about the making of American Ninja. This is just a classic movie. It's one of those movies you can't take seriously. You just can't take it seriously. Just sit back with your pop or a beer, some popcorn, and just enjoy the goofiness of the action. Michael Dudikoff at the time was a very good action star. So at least it wasn't somebody who was trying to do these moves and has absolutely no business trying to pretend to be a martial artist. And we've seen those actors, and you know who they are. I will not say names, but American Ninja, that's what it's called. And it is my number 7. Number 6. We're jamming through this. And with this, an old friend is about to make another return in another list on the countdown. He's somebody who has been named so many times, but that's a credit to his career, I guess. He's one of the greatest action stars in history. So of course he's going to get named. But not only has he been named a lot in a lot of different countdowns, he had his own countdown about his own movies. Pretty sure you know who I'm talking about. The question is, can you remember what movie I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure you're thinking about it. Does that help? Come on, that's gotta help. But in case you don't know what it is, it's directed by Mark L. Lester, and of course, it stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ray Dong Chong, Dan Haida. It is Commando. Commando stars, of course, Arnold as a former retired Special Forces colonel who's trying to save his daughter, who is abducted by former subordinates. And along the way, he meets Ray Dong Chong, who back then, another beauty. And of course, his daughter, oddly enough, was played by Alyssa Milano, who at the time you weren't thinking, what a beauty, because it was creepy to think that. I kind of was, because I was around the same age, so it wasn't too creepy. Of course, she would grow up, and she's definitely a beauty. Vernon Wells, who plays Bennett. Vernon Wells, the name may not mean anything to you, but the face, you've seen him. He was all over the place in the 80s and the 90s. He was just all over the place. You name a movie, he was in it, it seemed. And he's a character actor. He doesn't star specifically in any movies because he's just good at playing a villain. He's good at playing bastards. Commando, though, is, I think, the peak of the typical Arnold Schwarzenegger movie because of what he's known for: one-liners. The one-liners in this movie are all over the place. They're just flying out all over the place, talking about, he dropped somebody off of a little cliff. Somebody asked where the dude is. He says, I let him go. I mean, that's Arnold. I remember back in the day, I actually had an action figure from Commando, an Arnold Schwarzenegger action figure that came with all the weapons he had in the movie. That rocket launcher you see, it came with that. It was all, he's got the vest and the grenades and the weapons. He's got the paint on his face. I remember I had that action figure for a while. That action figure destroyed a lot of my other action figures. But again, Arnold Schwarzenegger, just one of the greatest action stars in history. The man's been mentioned numerous times. Like I said, he's had his own countdown on here. I did a countdown of 90s action stars. If you want to see where Arnold was, take a listen. did 80s action stars. If you want to see where he was, again, take a listen. But this guy has just been mentioned so many times on this show. But it's a credit to the man's career. It's not blowing smoke. If you were around during the 80s and 90s, the name Arnold Schwarzenegger was everywhere. You couldn't escape this guy. He was everywhere, and that's just a credit to his career. Argue whatever you think of his career since his political career, his movies since leaving the governorship. Say whatever you want about him. His problems with his maids, whatever, all that stuff. You can't deny he is one of the greatest action stars in history, and he was one of the biggest movie stars of all time. That's just a fact. It's credit to him, and he deserves that respect. So, number 6 for you, Rob. Commando. We are headed to the top 5, and I gotta tell you, some people might have a problem what I have as number 5, putting this over Commando, because this is another action star, but I just loved this movie. This is another huge action star, and there's not a lot of his movies I would put over Arnold's, but this year they were face to face, and to me, there's just something about this movie that he did that just barely beats Commando. It's directed by George P. Cosmos. I probably said that name horribly wrong. It is based off of a character from a book written by David Morrell, starring Crenna, Charles Napier, Sylvester Stallone. Does that help you as far as what it is? It's the 80s. You know what movies he did? Rambo, First Blood Part 2. Now, let's get this part out of the way. The Rambo titles are a bit confusing. Rambo, First Blood, Part 2. And then we just get to Rambo 3. Shouldn't it be Rambo, First Blood, Part 3? And then we just get Rambo, and now we have John Ram. The titles got confusing. But First Blood is honestly, of the Rambo movies, First Blood is probably my favorite. I have to think about it a little more, because it's either First Blood or Rambo. Those two are pretty awesome, but probably I'll have to think about it. But I might have to say that First Blood is the best. But this is right there. This is right there. I remember as a kid, I bought the Rambo action figures. Now, the funny thing is the Rambo action figures were based off of a cartoon show, which is unbelievable that Rambo would get a cartoon show, but he did. There was a Rambo cartoon show, and those were the action figures that I had, but I had all of them. Choppers, Rambos, I had Richard Crenna's character. I had all the characters. The show made no sense. I mean, you have Rambo's his character who's killing people, and of course, the cartoon, he's not killing anybody, but I do remember an episode where he got his arm broke. But Stallone at the time, he was trying to surpass Arnold. And for the most part, it's your choice if he did or not. But between Commando and this, I have to give it to Sly slightly, just slightly. There's just something about the Rambo character that we all just loved. It was ridiculousness, without a doubt. It was ridiculousness, but he was so badass. He was so badass in this role, and he was perfect for it. And Richard Crenna is Colonel Troutman. I was so glad they brought Colonel Troutman back. Colonel Troutman there wasn't a lot of entertaining other characters other than Rambo, except for Troutman. Rambo 3 is a piece of shit, but you get more Troutman. So that part I did like, but this is the peak of, you get the bandana, the red bandana that he's famous for. That came from here. The bow and arrow, that was here. This movie was, I'll have to do a list of Stallone movies. I did one of Arnold. I might as well do one probably of Stallone. Let me know if that's something you'd like me to do. But this was basically Rambo returns to the jungles of Vietnam on a mission to infiltrate an enemy base camp it's been discovered that there are still American POWs being held captive. That's the mission. That's the movie. He goes back where he came from, and it's not the greatest trip down memory lane, but along the way he does meet some friends, or a friend, I should say. Julie Nicholson, who plays Cho. Of course, you have Steven Bertikoff in this movie, who back in the day was just the ultimate villain. The name may not mean anything, but you've seen him. He was in Beverly Hills Cop. You've seen him. He was in Octopussy. Martin Kove is in this movie, who I shouldn't have to tell you who he is. If you've watched the Karate Kids, you know who this guy is. He's a bastard, and he's in the Cobra Kai TV show now. This, like I said, this is just Slide, as some would say, maybe at his best outside of Rocky. But yeah, I really have to think about it. I'm really interested now. Maybe I should do a Sylvester Stallone countdown show. But this was just a good time for, this was one of those few moments where Stallone was able to beat Arnold in something, at least in a movie. This year, to me, he beat him with this movie over Commando, Rambo, First Blood, Part 2. I own all the Rambo movies except the most recent one. And that's because it is a piece of shit. It is horrible. And I hope there is no more Rambo movies, even though I know they're going to do another one. I've heard they're going to do another one, except they're going to do a prequel. That's what I've heard. I don't know. I'm done with Rambo. I've done with Rambo. That last one was just so bad. But Rambo, First Blood, Part 2, number 5. Number 4. I try not to be too controversial. It sometimes happens. This is going to be a movie that I know people are going to look at me and go, what the fuck, dude? Really? Look, I like this movie. I love this movie. I own this movie. It to me, it's just good. I get what, that a lot of people may think this movie is shit. I really don't care. It's directed by Guy Hamilton, who, if you're a James Bond fan, you should know that name. He's been in part of the James Bond world for a while. Stars Fred Ward, Joe Gray, Wilford Brimley, Kate Mulgrew. Does that help? Probably not. So how about this? Remo Williams. The adventure begins. Look. Now, this is based off of a book series written by Richard Sapere. I probably said that name wrong. And Warren Murphy, called The Destroyer. And I've read a couple of the books. The books aren't that bad. But it's basically, this movie is about a cop who is killed, supposedly killed, and he gets plastic surgery and becomes trained to become an extraordinary yet unique type of assassin in the service of the United States, the president, in this top secret type of organization. And that's it. But the things he is able to do is, like avoiding bullets that shoot by, the athleticism, just the running on water, just all the things that is taught to Remo is so outlandish, so ridiculous, but it was entertaining to me. Fred Ward, when I think of Fred, this is what I think of as Remo Williams. Fred, I know you're not watching this or listening to this. Well, maybe you are. I don't know. But I love this movie. It is what I think of when I think of you. Some people may think of Tremors. I think of this. And if Fred Ward's name doesn't ring a bell, that's his face. That's his face. But this, and Joe Gray, oh God, Joe Gray, some people may have a problem with him playing this Chun, this Oriental type of character. He played it so well. Now, unfortunately, this was supposed to spawn off a series because James Bond, lots of spinoffs have been made from the beginning since James Bond debuted. Lots of TV shows and other movies. This was one of those many spinoffs, which is why it's called The Adventure Begins. They were hoping to spawn off a series of movies. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. There was a TV show. Now, the problem is it sucked, and it only made it past one pilot, which is on YouTube. So if you want to fish for it, be my guest. It's bad, though. It's really bad. If you have a problem with Joel Grey playing an Asian, you're really going to have a problem with who plays him in the TV show. If you want to risk watching it, by all means, watch it. I watched it long ago, and it is bad. It was just bad. But this movie, it's so odd. This movie costs so much to buy on DVD and Blu-ray. It costs so much. It's dropped a little bit finally, but it's weird that it costs so much. But that speaks, I think, to the rarity of the movie, and I think it also speaks to secretly what people think of it. I think more people like this movie than are willing to admit, and I don't know why they would be ashamed. This movie is just damn entertaining. It's fun. It's entertaining. I love that theme. I've been humming that theme in my head for so many years. This is just a good, goofy movie for people to enjoy. It's one of those you just can't take it seriously seriously. And before I move on to the next one, Kate Mulgrew. This is, Catherine Janeway from Star Trek Voyager. This is a younger Kate Mulgrew, and another beauty, and a fellow Iowan, by the way. So that is number 4. I know people have a problem with me putting Remo Williams on here. I accept it, but I'm sorry. I love this movie. I love this movie. It's one of those guilty pleasures. We all have them. This is one of mine. So there you go. Number 4, Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. Sadly, there wasn't a sequel, or else I'd have been all over it. Number 3, the 80s, there are certain movies you think of, and we're getting to a part of this countdown in which there's gonna be a movie or two that is immediately what you think of when you think of this era. If you know the movies that came out this year, if you definitely know, this is probably one of those movies you were waiting on for me to say, or maybe wondering if I would say. And let's be honest, anybody from this era, this is a movie they saw. This is a movie they listened to because they had the soundtrack. It is directed by a man who is synonymous with the 80s, and that's John Hughes. Written by John Hughes. This cast, you know the names, but instead of me saying the names, let's see the faces. You know them. You know every single one of them. Amelia Estevez, who is strangely looking at behind my back, kind of weird. Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, Anthony Michael Hall, and last but certainly not least, Molly Ringwald, The Breakfast Club. Now, this is synonymous with the 80s. This is one of the biggest movies of the era. It's one of the first movies you think of when it comes to this era. And for me, I love redheads, and this is how it started. Molly started it. Now, I also like Ali Sheedy very much as well. In fact, if I'm honest with myself, if I was going to ask somebody out, it would have been Ali Sheedy. Molly, though, started my little redheaded fetish, which it's hard to believe, but back then, it wasn't popular to like redheads. You were kind of a freak if you liked redheads. There were some people who actually thought something was wrong with you if you like redheads. But Molly, just to me, is just the most beautiful redhead there's ever been. I'm sorry. It's just how I feel. Part of my childhood. It's never going to go away. I love Gillian Anderson, for example. But this all started with Molly. But this movie, the soundtrack, everything about this movie is just amazing. Of course, it stars these kids, these high schoolers, 5 students who have to meet for detention one Saturday. And they're completely different kids. You have a rebel, a jock, a pretty girl, the strange girl, the kind of nerd guy. You have all these different types of high school kids who we all were and we could all relate to. There was some character in this you related to. Somebody you related to. For me, I was never a jock, so I kind of related to Judd Nelson's character, and I also related to Anthony Michael Hall's character, but I also related to Ali Sheedy's character. I'm a nerd, but I'm also a loner, and I'm a little strange. That was kind of just who I was. So those 3 characters spoke to me a lot more. If I'm honest, the character that I didn't like the most was Emilio Estevez's character. The jock, I always hated the jocks at the school, but this movie is just a classic. It's an institution. Reunions of this, they've done reunions of this, and there was some talks of doing remakes of this or a sequel to this, which a sequel I'd be interested in, bringing everybody back, a reboot or anything that I wouldn't want to see. I think they would just screw it up. But this is just an institution of the 80s. You cannot think of the 80s without thinking of The Breakfast Club. And of course, who can not forget about Paul Gleason playing Richard Vernon, who's the principal. He was just, when we were all kids, we all knew a teacher or a principal or assistant principal or whatever who was like him. Just an ass. Just an absolute ass. We all knew somebody like that. And like I said, this is just a classic, an institution of the 80s. If you grew up in that era, you watched this movie. This may be your favorite movie for the year. This could be your favorite movie of the entire decade. It was just that big. This was just a huge movie. If you weren't around back then, it may be hard for you to think that this movie was big, but it covered every lexicon. It covered everything. The movie was huge. The soundtrack was huge. I had this, I'm going to date myself, on record, not CD, not even tape, record. I had the record, the LP I had of this. So The Breakfast Club, just an institution, and it's third on this list. It's third. There are two movies above this, and as painful as it is, when you see what the other two movies are, you'll understand why this is third. It's a painful third because it's so damn good. But number three, The Breakfast Club, an institution of the 80s without a shadow of a doubt. Number two, I said I was going to have movies that are institutions, that are big parts of this year and of the entire decade. The Breakfast Club is one of them. This next one is another one. And maybe you'll understand why I have this above The Breakfast Club. So instead of me mentioning directors and everything, I'm just going to show you. Then I'll say the directors, even though I really don't need to. Yep. For those watching, you saw it. For those listening, this movie is a huge movie of the 80s. Again, it is one of those that some folks would say is the best movie of this year and the best 80s movie of the entire decade. Directed by Richard Donner, written by Chris Columbus and Steven Spielberg, starring, and this is again another stellar cast: Sean Astin, Josh Brolin, Corey Feldman, Robert Davi, Joe Pantoliano, Cary Green, Ke-Huy Quan, I probably said that name horrifically wrong, Martha Plimpton, The Goonies. The Goonies. I mean, it's kind of hard to try to describe this plot, but I'll do my best. This is a movie about a group of young misfits. Just a group of young kids that call themselves Goonies. And remember, Goonies never say die. And the Goonies discovered this map. They found this map and they set up on this grand adventure to find a pirate treasure. One-Eyed Willie. Anyway, they set off on this journey to find this pirate. And all these exciting things happen. And they meet some not nice people, some criminals played by Anne Ramsey and Robert Davi and Joe Pantoliano, but also they meet Sloth, who somehow managed to steal this movie. Sloth steals the movie. You guys. I mean, the Goonies, it's an institution. Another institution of the 80s that they have talked about remaking, rebooting, updating, reunions have occurred. This is one of those quintessential movies of the 80s that, again, during that era, you watched this movie. Hands down, you watched The Goonies. And again, it pains me just having this as the runner-up. It pains me having this at 2, just like it pained me to have The Breakfast Club at 3. These are two institutions. These are two mega hits, absolute hits. No matter what era you are, as far as generations, you heard of these movies. These movies are absolutely epic. And if you haven't somehow heard of The Breakfast Club or The Goonies, then I strongly recommend that you watch these movies. Such great entertainment. The 80s, one thing I gotta love about this countdown that listener suggested me is this is taking me on a trip down memory lane, and a good trip down memory lane. So definitely gotta thank that listener again. I'm forgetting your name because I'm so horrible with names. I gotta write your name down so I can congratulate you or thank you. I'm gonna try to remember to do that when I close out this entire series. But The Goonies, again, another movie. Glad I own it. I haven't gotten this one on. This is one of those movies I keep pushing myself away from buying it on Blu-ray. I have it on DVD. I keep meaning to buy it on Blu-ray, but there's so many other movies I still haven't bought that I'm just behind. I'm just so behind, and I have way too many anyway. But The Goonies, like I said, an amazing movie, absolutely an epic 80s movie. One of the biggest movies, not just of the year, but of the entire decade. And it is synonymous with the 80s. It's just one of those movies you think of first when people ask you to name 80s movies. This is one of the ones that I would be shocked if it wasn't in people's top 5, top 3 to mention, but gets the runner-up spot. The Goonies, number 2. Oh boy, we are at the tippy top. numero uno. But before we go there, let's do a quick review. Number 10 in this countdown from 1985 movies is National Lampoon's Vacation. Number 9 is Clue. Number 8 is The Last Dragon, Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Number 7, American Ninja, not Warrior or anything like that. It's American Ninja. Number 6, Commando. Number 5, Rambo, First Blood, Part 2. Number 4, Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. I know some of you still have a problem with that. I don't care. Number 3, The Breakfast Club. And of course, number 2, runner-up, The Goonies. What on earth is going to be number 1? Oh boy. Number 1 on the countdown. The number 1 movie from 1985. You talk about a movie that hit the world big time. This was a movie that is tremendously epic, and it made a star. It made a huge star. This movie. It spawned off a franchise. It spawned off video games, cartoon shows, remakes, or not remakes, but tons of stories being written. The soundtrack was epic. Just an amazing franchise, this movie. Directed by Robert Zemeckis. That should already say it right there. That should already tell you what this movie is. But in case you don't know, yep, Back to the Future. Starring Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Thomas F. Wilson, Mark McClure was in this, Crispin Glover. I mean, this movie, this was just epic. This was epic, this movie. And I hope now you understand why Breakfast Club was 3 and why Goonies is 2. For this year, it could only be Back to the Future. To just say this movie was just gigantic, it just doesn't describe it. It really doesn't. Now, clearly this one extremely reeks of the 80s, but somehow, to me, this movie has aged very well, despite the fact that it is pure 80s. It even tells you it's pure 80s just from the way it starts, but it doesn't matter. This movie has aged so well, and it made an absolute star out of Michael J. Fox. An absolute legend he became because of this movie. Because of this, we know him in things like Spin City and Family Ties, and he would do other movies like The Secret to My Success, Teen Wolf. I mean, his career took off, but Back to the Future is without a shadow of a doubt what you think of him for first. And there's still talks of them doing a Back to the Future 4. Now, as far as the other Back to the Future movies, I do like Back to the Future Part 2. I do like that one. Back to the Future Part 3, though, I think it is the weakest of the 3. Of the 3, something has to occupy the worst. And to me, it's Back to the Future 3. Now, I remember watching the cartoon show. I wasn't a huge fan of the cartoon show, but somehow I still watched it every week, every Saturday. I would still watch it, even though part of me was like, this isn't good. I still would watch it. And that's, for me, that spoke to how big the movie was. And let's talk about the soundtrack. Huey Lewis and the News, and of course, that theme, that instrumental theme to Back to the Future. Absolutely epic. And one of the greatest movie themes of all time is Back to the Future. It is so epic. It pumps you up just from the moment you hear it. You get excited to like, oh, Back to the Future. But you know it instantly. From the first note, you know that's Back to the Future. This is a set that I do own. I own all 3 movies. Of course, there was no way I was not gonna own this. Now, I have it on DVD. I bought a box set of it on DVD. I don't have the Blu-ray set, but it is something saved on my Amazon DVD Blu-rays list. It's actually one of the earliest things I added on there once Blu-ray technology came in, and as soon as that came out, I immediately added it. Back to the Future is just huge. It's just huge. As far as the plot, I mean, Marty McFly, played by Michael J. Fox, plays this high school kid who is accidentally sent back in time 30 years and meets his mother. Now, he's sent back in time in a DeLorean that his friend Doc Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, had made. Now, the DeLorean, if you don't know, the DeLorean was a failed car. Before the movie came out, this was a failed product line, a failure. Now that car is tremendously famous, and it's only because of this movie. Big time prop to the movie. It made the car legendary. It made the car legendary. It wasn't legendary before. It was a flop. Now, when anybody has a DeLorean, they think of Back to the Future. And the cars are actually cool now because of Back to the Future. This movie is, I mean, the time travel aspect, let's face it, time travel movies, they've always been around, but this, for some reason, I don't know why, it made me believe in it as a possibility. I don't know why. I truly don't. The one element that is a little off is obviously when you go back in time and your mother falls in love with you. That's a little weird, especially when your mother looks like Leah Thompson. If that's what your mother looks like back then, big problem, because Leah is still gorgeous. She still looks good. She looked good then. She still looks good now. She is stunning. And that, I mean, Leah Thompson is your mother back then, that would have been a serious problem. And of course, he meets his dad as well, and he's trying to get them together. It's a weird plot. Of course, Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown just steals the movie. He absolutely steals the movie. Just one of the most interesting characters they ever did in movie history. He's so interesting, so eccentric, and they found the right person. There is nobody on the face of the earth that could have played Doc Brown better than Christopher Lloyd. And big time props to them. Every time they get together for a reunion, it's just great television. It's just entertaining to see those two together again. I remember them popping up in a Jimmy Kimmel episode. They drove up in the DeLorean. They were dressed just like they were in Back to the Future. It was just awesome. So Back to the Future, just one of those movies that was truly perfect. It really was perfect. Not a lot of them, but this is one of them. This is one of those movies, thinking of the 80s, this is one of those, that's one of the first ones to pop off your lips. Back to the Future, and it is one of the biggest hits ever, from not just this year, but throughout the 80s. This was one of the biggest hits, and this is one of the biggest movies, period. And it's a huge franchise. Back to the Future, my number one. That's the countdown. So what do you think? What did you think? Those were my movies. What would be your movies? Did I forget some? I mean, there was some other movies that came out this same year. Let me just name a few of these movies that came out the same year. The Legend of Billie Jean, Silverado, Rocky IV, Brewster's Million, Teen Wolf, Fright Night, Weird Science. I know some people are probably shocked Weird Science didn't show up in here, but it just didn't quite make it. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, Police Academy 2 First Assignment, Man with One Red Shoe, Santa Claus the Movie. Look, I don't like Christmas, but for some odd reason, I like that movie. I don't know why, but those are other movies that came out this year. And as we get closer to the beginning of the 80s, again, these movies are going to get big. These movies are going to get really interesting. So again, what did you think? What is your list? Do you have any suggestions as far as the future lists? Please let me know. You can let me know, and you can listen to the show in many different ways. You can send me an email. Just send the email to thecountdown2020@gmail.com. You can communicate with me, tell me your ideas, give me your own lists. You can go on to Facebook and just search at the Countdown 2020 Podcast 1. Do all that stuff that I just mentioned. You can also listen to the show. You can go on to Twitter, just search at the Countdown PO1. Get in touch with me there. Give me your ideas. Let me know what you think. You can listen to the show on Spotify. Just search the Countdown 2020. You can send me a message over on Instagram as well. Just search the Countdown 20. You can listen to the show on Amazon Audible. Just search the Countdown Podcast. All are available through podbean.com. And of course, added just a few weeks ago, I have a YouTube channel. Just go onto the YouTube page and you can listen to the show, or you could be doing what you could be looking at me right now. You can search the Countdown Podcast with MJ Book. Please like, listen, follow, subscribe. I love doing this show, but I always love hearing it from you, the listener and the viewer. So please use those avenues to communicate with me. Give me your ideas. Let me know what you think. If you think there's something I'm doing wrong, please tell me. If you have any ideas to help make the show better, please tell me. I'm open to all that. You're not offending me on that. Trust me, you're not. Do want to thank IncomeTech.com and Kevin MacLeod for the royalty-free music, Ice Flow, that you hear at the end in the beginning of every episode. As far as listening to it, do want to throw this shout out to Third Generation Wrestling. If you're a professional wrestling fan, please listen to that show. Cover the sport of wrestling, do movie reviews. We just covered AEW, just did a review on their most recent pay-per-view, Double or Nothing. Like I said, fun was had by all. Please listen to that. Recent episodes that they did a countdown of gimmick matches, did a review of WrestleMania Backlash, did a review of a NXT Takeover War Games from 2017, Mortal Kombat, and just as an announcement on their show, they've already announced this as well. They will be going back and doing the original Mortal Kombat movie. And that I don't know if that's going to be a inter-promotional episode like the last one was, because the Mortal Kombat review was also here on the Countdown as well. I'm assuming it might be. We'll find out once we actually start recording that one. Should be fun. And unless something happens, I'm going to continue to run through the 80s here. So we're going to get the 80s dealt with and over with so I can move on to some other topics. Even though I'm having fun, do want to get on to some other topics. So that's the Countdown, folks. I want to thank all you listeners for listening in. Thank all the viewers for viewing on the YouTube channel. Can't do this show without you. Appreciate every single one of you. Please go out there, get yourself vaccinated. Let's put an end to this damn COVID so we can move on with life, so we can just have our lives back. But we can't do it unless you get yourself vaccinated. So please do your part, get vaccinated, and I will catch you all again on the next episode of the Countdown. Have yourself a great day or evening, whatever time it is. Bye-bye.